Welcome to another episode of The Local Dive. This is Alex Scott, joined by co-host Ashlyn Portero. Dean is out again, so we have maybe the most prolific podcaster on City Church staff, Hunter Leavine, joining us. How are you guys doing?
Good. Glad to be here.
Doing good. Thanks for the kind intro.
Yeah, for sure. I was going to say, you run the For the Church podcast for our church.
For the campus.
For the campus, wow.
Trademark. Yeah, don't get me in trouble.
Wrong.
I run that one too.
You're so prolific. What do you do again? What's your podcast called?
For the Campus, my bad.
Listen to it all the time.
And then I will get this one right. The Captain's Collective, which
That's
is
right.
your kind of side hustle fishing fishing podcast. So now we're excited to have you on and talk some college ministry stuff as we kind of continue in a series with next gen leaders in our church. We had Zach on last week, who got to talk all things student ministry, and then we're gonna have our kids director Courtney Webb on at some point as well. And so thanks for joining us. Before we dive into the serious conversation and take a deep dive into college ministry, we wanted to spend some time in the shallow end talking about like misconceptions in church marketing.
Mm-hmm.
So what are some things that you guys see, trends, whatever, that you see in church marketing that you think is just ridiculous?
Well, I'll go first and say I think that way too many things are, and I'm especially maybe thinking about seasonal type stuff, like how we are so dependent on food. Like, I mean, I think it's good. Like, and at City Church events, like we want to be hospitable. So
I am microaggressed right now.
So no, I knew you were going to think
I'm
that's
kidding.
No, I promise that's not because we serve snacks at College Ministry. But like, but that's a good example of like being hospitable, offering something. But you know what? Sometimes when you're like, people are going to come because we have food, like because they can't go get Little Caesars pizza, or they can't go get, moms can't go get a donut on Mother's Day anywhere else besides church. They're definitely going to come here.
Nothing says come to church like slightly congealed cheese on a Papa John's pizza.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, no, I'm with you there.
Starting there.
I'm with you there.
Yeah. I think my favorite one is when people like get really into branding whatever teaching series they're in, and they really are like, okay, we want to roll this thing out. We really want to, we've really put together this huge brand package, and it's really going to get people excited to come back to church again because we have a new series. And it's like, I feel like how out of touch are you if you think that like the reason that somebody is like not coming to your church gathering is because of the staleness of, your series. It's like, you have to think about it. It's like, I have a lot of friends who are lost, and what do they do on Sunday morning? They fish, they hang out with their family, they sleep in because they stayed up late on Saturday, they're traveling to the beach. And so like, it's like, you know what? I have this huge lifestyle that I love and enjoy, but they're starting a new series and I was going to come, but I didn't want to jump in halfway through. So now I got to really make sure I get the opportunity to
be there
be
from
on
the
the front
get-go.
end.
Yeah.
And look at the brand, so I don't know. I think that's probably overhyped too.
Yeah. Can you share your you've shared this before with our staff, but like the idea that there's never been a testimony about a new series.
Yeah. Well, you just like don't hear about people going, we record testimonies here at City Church, but you don't hear about some guy that's like, I was really into drugs and just rock bottom in my life and sleeping with my girlfriend and partying every night, and then I heard about a church starting a new series, and I thought, yeah, I need to get in on this. or the same with like set designs, which I appreciate when people take their job serious, and like we have beautiful set designs here, but like, I wasn't interested in Christ until I saw wood panel background. It's like, maybe what the scriptures teach of actually
saved by shiplap.
Maybe, yes. That's a good hashtag.
Yeah.
But maybe actually investing in people, giving them the tools to share the gospel and discipling them is the best way to reach lost people, and not aesthetic branding.
Yeah. Yeah. Not that those things are, like you're saying, they're not inherently bad. Like, it's not bad to brand a series. It's not bad to have a nice stage design or professional aesthetic, or to give away food.
They're not mutually
exclusive.
We do all those things
right
here. Well, and maybe almost to like what you were saying, Hunter, like those are all great ways that people can take ownership and do their jobs well to, show creative expression in the church. But I think like to the point that we're talking about, when it becomes your marketing tool, it's like, I can go to Target and look at their home setup, and like that can make me happy. But there's lots more important things at church.
Yeah, I feel like this is sort of in the same vein as the new series, but like an iPad giveaway. Like, I'm just like, is anybody really coming to church like hoping that they sit under the seat with the green, they sit on the seat with the green dot underneath? Like, it's like, I don't know. I don't think anybody is. And I mean, that's not really an effective. Okay. So it's going to work for
I'm
Hunter.
the target audience.
Like, I don't know. I don't think I'd be like, hey, to my lost friends, hey guys, you should come. We're giving away an iPad this week. We've got 900 chairs. You might sit under the right one. Well, and then what happens if nobody sits in the chair?
Yeah. And it's just like the message that we're sending too, because it's like you're trying to tell people, like, I don't know, if you're almost back to like the testimony thing. It's like if your friend is like at their lowest point and they're going through like a deep period of suffering, you're trying to tell them the truth that like the Christian life is not, we're not trying to share the prosperity gospel, but then we're like, come to church, you might win a motorcycle, and so it's kind of like, I'm getting mixed
I've never
messages
thought of that.
here.
Yeah. Come and be blessed, maybe.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, yeah, I think that's a great point though, is I actually think the thing that is most attractive about Christianity is the truth that we hold in the message. Yes. And even though people will disagree with me on that, I work with college students that are across the board background wise and belief wise. And really, I mean, it's not bad to have a good stage design or brand a series or give away an iPad, but like, let's act like people who have some confidence in our message, like what Paul says. And I think that that's really attractive to the next generation versus like, hey, we have the thing that will change your life and give you hope and give you real satisfaction, and we have an iPad 8. It's like, it's like,
is it Jesus or the iPad? Yeah. I'm a little confused.
Well, and usually the messaging is like the new series, the iPad, the food or whatever, that's more important. And then it's like, oh, by the way, Jesus, like kind of sneak it in there. Which I think, Hunter, maybe I don't know if you're saying this directly, but the way I heard that is like, no, let's have confidence in the thing that unites us, the thing that gathers us together, that allows us to live on mission. And then, let's do these other things well. But like, let's let that be the thing that attracts. So cool. Well, we'll jump in and head kind of into the deep dive and talk through some college ministry stuff. And I think, Hunter, maybe one of the first things that we can talk about to tail off of what you were just saying is like, oftentimes, we were talking about before the episode, people will come in and be like, hey, I really want to see a Tuesday night. That's when we do, our college ministry services. And so, they think like, oh, it's the lights, it's the music, it's the brand, it's the whatever that's really drawing people in. Like, people are like, oh, there's a new series at City Church U, which is probably like what, John or something. You know? Like,
no, we're teaching through Philippians, and it's a series called Philippians.
Oh man, that's deep.
Yeah. They're eating it up.
So simplistic.
Minimalistic.
So maybe just talk a little bit about so there's sometimes a perception outwardly, and I think this is maybe true of our church as a whole sometimes, that it's the I'll use air quotes around this word, show or experience that brings people in, that attracts people. I know you would not agree with that. Can you maybe just unpack that some?
Yeah, I think it's really important too with college students who they are offered so many different experiences. The experience of going to a house party, the experience of going to a football game, the experience of going to a concert. I mean, just there's so many experiences around them that I think we have to think about, like, what have we actually been tasked with? So we don't do a bad job on, we got Jacob running producer Jacob. And he helps with a lot of our creative stuff with City Church U, and he's a college student and helps with everything from photographs to lights to all the cool stuff. And I think that you just don't want to get distracted away from what do you actually offer that makes things different. What have you actually been tasked with? So for our college students, we put so much energy into developing student leaders who are basically interns in our church, who are equipped to do the work of ministry, like Paul says in Ephesians 4. We got all these different people who are tasked to equip the saints for the work of ministry. So that's what we focus on. And the result of that is that we have creative people who are really good at running social media, which I don't run. And we have really great creative people who are good at running lights or good musicians or whatever. But the thing that is actually moving the needle forward for us as a ministry is actually the quality of discipleship we do and how serious we take that and the investments we make there. And every single one of our students, when people come on Tuesdays, because sometimes people want to come on a Tuesday and see what we do, I always make a specific point to assign them to hang out and spend the time with a student leader, not me, just so they can see like, wow, these students are reading like Nine Marks books and like Jonathan Edwards, and they're having conversations that are deep and intimate. That's actually what's people need to see, is this is how well you can train up college students and how serious they can take their faith. Not like, okay, now how do you do transition from prayer to music? It's like sometimes really bad.
Yeah.
Like sometimes really bad, but I mean, it's like, that's not the thing that we're really seeing life change from.
Right. Yeah. People aren't coming back not coming back because you botched a transition from a prayer to music.
That would be one bad botch.
Yeah. Yeah. But no, I mean, I think that's important. And you mentioned that sort of discipleship is, I guess you could say, the engine that's driving the ministry forward. And I know you've mentioned student leaders, and Ashlyn, maybe you can talk about it from your perspective in our church, like as you've seen the way that the student leadership program has developed over the last few years. And when we visited a church in Iowa, Cornerstone Church in Ames, Iowa, that really kind of gave us a vision for some of what college ministry could look like in Tallahassee, connected to a local church. And then we tasked Hunter with leading it and making it happen. But maybe can you talk about sort of the life that student leaders bring to our church, and how you've seen that, like as they've been discipled through kind of what Hunter and the college team has put together, how that's been really not just fuel for their ministry, but fuel and impact for our church.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, one of the biggest shifts to me that I think has been made over the last few years is that we back in, whenever that was, such like 2017, I'm like,
something like that.
What is time now? A few years ago, and even I can think back to like 5 or 6 years ago, when maybe the ratio of college students was even higher, to the rest of the church than it even is now, just as the church has grown in the ways that it has. I think for a long time we found ourselves asking, like, we have these college students, like, what can we give them? Like, how can we do something with them? And now that has so shifted because of what, Hunter, your team has built and put into place, that now we are seeing so much of the life of the church just immersed with college students. They're leading in all of our ministry areas. They're being discipled. They're going on to whatever their next step in life is. They're interested in, further missions work, or just, going to, even if they're going to work in the marketplace, just being a church member and having a solid foundation that they have developed and been given here. And so I think to see that shift happen, where, all of the structures and the systems have been put in place, and that's totally a credit to, of course, the work of the Lord, but to, Hunter and his team and their faithfulness in that. It now seems like it's less of, wow, you're a church with a lot of college students, to like, yes, that's true, but we see them just completely immersed and as such vital members of the life of the church. And so I just think figuring out how his, Hunter's team has been able to figure out that discipleship piece that doesn't like silo college students off, so that it's like this big, like, kingdom or island that's been built over here that's disconnected from the rest of the church, but actually reaching a specific population within the church that brings them further into the life of the church. To me, when I look at it, I see that as one of the best like gifts and achievements of that is how strong our college students are as they exist in our church family. So
yeah. And I think, one of the things, Hunter, that you guys have always said about the ministry from the beginning is that you want to make great church members, that like as students leave their time at Florida State, FAMU, TCC, wherever they're attending school, and move and go off to wherever, is that they can look back on the 4 years that they had, and, hopefully in our college ministry, and that they have become great church members. And I think we've seen that happen to your point too, Ashlyn, that like, it's not this thing that's happening over here where they're just coming to this, service and kind of consuming, but they're actually integrating into the life of the church. Hunter,
it's not like a church within our church.
Yeah, exactly. So Hunter, can you talk about maybe the importance, as you have developed that, of this idea of being a college ministry that is connected to a local church? And that doesn't, there are other models of ministry, especially college ministry, where it's either a parachurch ministry or, maybe just just this ministry that exists just kind of on an island alone by itself, and what the importance of being connected to the local church is, for, at least for us.
Yeah, and that's a great point that you made too, that you could be a parachurch ministry who actually makes it an emphasis and a priority to help people understand the value and see the value of local churches, and you could be a ministry within a church that doesn't do that, and they're not mutually exclusive. I think one of the interesting things too on that before I answer that is, if you're a parachurch ministry and you say that you exist to serve the church, but you have no metrics, no designed way of figuring out if you're being effective in that, and you do have metrics and everything else, like the numbers that you're gathering, discipleship groups, whatever, like I would challenge you on that. That'd be like being like, hey man, my number one priority right now is losing weight. And you're like, well, do you have a scale? No. Why would I weigh myself? It's like, that's probably not your priority, but yeah, for us, like, I think some important things are, one, I do think that it just starts with having people on the team who love their church and who model that. I think it's also about thinking about how can the ministry that I lead serve the rest of the church, and not how can I just get things from the church for these people. So it's like that kind of two-way street. But yeah, and I think another big aspect of it too is it takes time, and you got to like get them with older people in the church and let that relationship develop.
Mm-hmm.
No more insight.
I thought you were going somewhere else.
I mean, we can have a longer conversation on it, but I think a big part of it too is trying to help your students learn how to think, how do I fit into this church, and not what does this church do for me?
Yeah, no, that's good. What are some things, and I think that the church was City Church specifically was influential for me in college. I got connected as a college student. Ashlyn got connected as a college student shortly after. Hunter, you were connected as a high school student, but it was obviously
pretending to be a college student.
Were you our first high school student?
Vanna Hall, I think,
Vanna.
was our, now Kelly.
There was a small group of us pretending to be college students. So I jokingly used to tell people when I worked in youth ministry that our youth ministry was a bunch of people pretending to be in college ministry.
And now
it's come a long way.
Yeah, I was going to say. And now you are.
Like, you're there.
But, so as you think about the role that this church has played in our lives in sort of those formative years, what are some things, I know obviously you want them to become great church members, but what are some things that, and maybe Ashlyn, you can speak to this too, as just somebody who cares about the college students at our church, that you would want to see on the other side of 4 years of ministry as a college student in this church? Like, I mean, maybe flesh out this idea of building great church members. What do we mean by that?
Yeah. Well, we desire to see every college student become a student leader and put them in opportunities to be mentored by people in our church, to be reading good literature, to learn how to study their Bible. There's a long conversation about what the scope and sequence is that we do with those student leaders, but we give them a lot of tools. Like great church members, they love the church, they love the Word of God, they know how to study the Word of God, they have spiritual disciplines, they want to serve other people. We tell all of our student leaders that our desire is to teach them and train them how to lead city groups or small Bible studies. Like, we want them to be able to have people over to their homes and talk about the scriptures and practice hospitality. And that's the most important piece of just somebody who comes into church and says, man, I'm excited to be a part of this church. I love this church. I'm committed to this church. I'm financially giving to this church. I'm looking for ways to use my talents and gifts to move the mission forward, to learn how to submit to authority, which is a long conversation with college students, but like to help reshape the way that they see authority and learn how to do that is really important. To understand, have a good grasp of what biblical men, biblical women look like, to be able to be good husbands and good wives and good moms and good friends. Kind of reverse engineer. Like, we sat down with all of our guy student leaders and worked through a passage and said, this is what a good elder looks like. Why would you not want to be an elder one day? Why would you not desire to serve in this way? So, that's for us kind of our main ticket. And that looks a lot more like our mentor groups, which both of you guys are involved in that, and a lot more like the things that people can't see on social media. That long term, I pray, and my hope is that a pastor will say, hey man, a couple of years ago, a student graduated from, Florida State or FAMU, moved up here and got involved in our church. And man, they love their church. They are not difficult. They serve others, man. And they said the way that they really learned how to do that was in y'all's ministry. That's kind of success for us.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah. I mean, gosh, I can't say it any better than that. But just to echo off of that, and to think of maybe some specific things that stand out to me from what Hunter said, talking with a fair amount of young women who have, especially are either like getting ready to graduate or have just graduated, or maybe have been, transitioned to like young professional, for,
I can't wait. That's going to be a great podcast.
Oh man.
That's the thing I know the least about.
Maybe they've been out of college for a couple years or something, that when there is that, kind of just like disillusionment and like feeling of like lostness, that I just see that kind of like crisis happen for a lot of people. And I felt a lot of that as a college student and a young adult at that age too. And I think a lot of that comes from having not experienced to the fullest, or having not gotten a lot of that equipping and training that our students are getting. And so when Hunter's talking about being a great friend, a great professional, a great church member, a great family member, all of those things, I think when I see young women in like their, really early 20s, a lot of the like pressures and the difficult seasons they go through, I think a lot of that stems from like still wanting to build their own kingdom and to feel important, to feel significant, or not knowing how to make friends as an adult, like trying to navigate relationships in a different life phase. And when you can get all of that through your college ministry and through your local church, like when that is actually the center of your life, where not just you're equipping in terms of Bible reading and theological growth and those kinds of things, but also where you're being trained in relationships. I mean, I just think about in college and, shortly after, I had to do so much like unlearning and relearning from just the way that I grew up. And so I think that's just such a pivotal, important time in anyone's life. But when that can be a place that really serves students well, so that then they can go on and be like healthy, functioning adults, by the Lord's grace. That's just, I can't think of almost anything better that a college ministry could give their students, because that literally means you're sending, healthy people who are growing in wholeness and Christ likeness out into the world. And that's going to make a huge difference in the kingdom, and it's going to make a huge difference in the church and in their lives and in the places that they go and live in. So that just really excites me and makes me so grateful for the way that our college ministry operates, because I see that happening.
And I'd say energy wise, probably the number one thing that we teach students throughout their time here is conflict resolution. In Matthew 18, a lot of these students have never properly biblically worked through conflict that they've experienced with other people. A lot of them have never seen it modeled well in home. They haven't seen it modeled well at school. And so they come and they're excited. They show up. They are excited about the ministry. They see the services. They meet these older student leaders who are on fire for the Lord, and they get really, really excited about the ministry. And they come into the ministry and they realize, as all Christians realized for thousands of years now, that it's really hard and that we're all sinful, and we hurt each other and we make mistakes and we blatantly sin against each other out of envy and jealousy and strife and anger, and they don't know how to handle it. And we have to actually teach them how to handle it and force it and enforce it. And I've probably had at least 5 to 6 conversations the past 12 months where a student leader has come to me about a conflict and said, I just such and such did this and they're in sin and I think you need to talk to them. And every single time I look right at them and I say, okay, I just want you to know you're in sin too, because you're not following the model that Jesus lays out in Matthew 18. And it's actually a really important thing that we preach on, teach on, enforce. I would discipline a student leader for not following Matthew 18. Like, you're not going to live that way. And I will tell you that when I just preached and mentioned this in the sermon Tuesday night, that nothing has been more discouraging to me in ministry than seeing a bunch of adults who can't resolve conflict, and then they leave churches and they act like it's because of the preaching, it wasn't deep enough for me. And that sounds really admirable, oh, you have such a deep appetite. And the reality beneath the curtain is somebody sinned against me, and I might have all sorts of knowledge, but I just can't live out this one verse that Jesus teaches. And so we're trying, we do time management, we do stuff like that, but I'm telling you, conflict resolution, if you work with college students, you have to take that serious, because it will tear your ministry apart.
Yeah, I can't think of as, I had a group of guys that were in a mentor group. I think I had most of the kind of the core for 3 years, 2 or 3 years. And so many times they would come to me and say, hey, I'm really worried about so-and-so. Like, I see this pattern.
Yeah.
And I'm like, did you tell them? You know, like,
no, I thought you would.
Yeah. And I'm like, you know, yeah, can I take them to lunch and can I sit down and go, hey, so-and-so's concerned about you in this way?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I could. But the reality is, like, they see it. They have
Mm-hmm.
they have a closer relationship because this person's their roommate, or, you know, they lead a Bible study with them or whatever. And it's just, I mean, but I think even as adults, sometimes we have to say that, like, there's this temptation to go sort of around things.
Yeah.
And so I think that's an incredible skill, not even just from, I mean, most importantly as Christians,
Yeah.
but just a life skill to say, hey, if I have an issue with somebody, I just need to go. I need
Mm-hmm.
to talk to them. I need to, you know,
and learn how to do it well. And,
Yeah.
you know,
And if I can just add, like, and Hunter, something I think that you have done a great job with from the get-go is just being all in committed to equipping students to do ministry, you know, to
Mhm.
live out the Christian life. Like, you don't treat college students like they are like your spies on the ground to let you know where the fires are to put out.
Yeah.
You know, you're not like, okay, you tell me where the ministry needs to be done and then I'll go and do it. You're like, I mean, even in terms of sharing their faith on campus and spending the time with their peers, like, you're pouring into them so that they can go do that. And I just think that's so empowering and so important. And I mean, I think a lot of this that we're talking about ties back to that approach. And I think that has been done really successfully. And so it's cool to see that students are growing in maturity and boldness and all of the other things they need to live out their faith, because that's what you value.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it's evident in the sort of development mindset that you have and you've created for the students, because I think, like, even in conflict, you know, management, like, and resolution, you're actually doing Ephesians 4.
Mhm.
Like, you're equipping them for the work of the ministry, because part of our ministry is reconciliation. And so if somebody has wronged us, like, we need to go and repair that relationship, extend grace, or ask for forgiveness, depending on, you know, where we're at. And so, like, I think sometimes there's a temptation, at least the way that I think about that passage in Ephesians 4 is like, okay, yeah, I got to, like, do the work of the ministry means, like, help pull off this event, or help pull, you know, and
pass out flyers on, and, you know.
Yeah, exactly. Let me get people to this
Yeah.
thing, you know, and they're going to contribute in that way. But really, like you're saying, no, like, as a pastor, it's not my job to sit down with everybody that's in sin, you know, or everybody that has an issue, but, like, no, you have the same spirit that I have. So you go and be somebody who's going to confront in a loving way for the, you know, concern and care of their soul, or to just say, hey, you know what, I've actually wronged you. I need to apologize. I need to ask for forgiveness and allow them to you know, minister to one another.
Yeah.
I think it shows the commitment that you have to Ephesians 4.
And my team gets pulled in those conversations all the time after all these preliminary things have happened, and we need to be. And we try to teach students too that, like, when you're doing that and you're pulling Amanda, our executive director's, attention into this thing, that's time that she's not given to her family or not giving to a situation that has already gone through this and has escalated to the point where people have confronted the student in our church. They're not repentant. Now we need to give them time to work through a very hard, challenging conversation. And you're pulling our attention over here about, you know, trivial things that you could, dishes in the sink of your roommate or something, that you need to just talk to your roommate, you know? And the other thing I'd say with that is I gave, like, some leadership thoughts on staff a while back on one of them, and I really believe this is, like, if you're in a position within a church team like mine, if you're doing your job really well, sometimes you'll look lazy.
Yeah, no, I think that's I think that's a leadership.
It's a
development
license
principle.
to be lazy, but no, I mean, it's not lazy, but it's I just meet so many people who they just aren't willing to give up. You know, I don't know if they don't trust the students to have the conversations, but they're just holding so tight to everything. And you got to hold things loosely and allow people to actually do that ministry. And a lot of people don't want to raise people up to do ministry. A lot of people want to have a ministry people attend. And those can be different things.
That's good.
That's good.
What are, you know, I was going to ask a different question, but on that, what are some things? You're a great team builder. You give ministry away freely. I think we've talked about that a bunch. What are some things, maybe disciplines or ways that you think about that people can maybe glean from you, and just how to invite, you know, one of the phrases that you use is invitational leadership. You invite other people into the work of leadership that you're doing. How do you flesh that out?
Yeah, I think, you know, you have to think about what can only I do, and then what can other people do, and truthfully probably do better. Like, a great example of that would be social media. I'm not very good at social media, but we have students who are great and they love doing it, and they're maybe even studying that. Like, those are easy things to hand away. And, you know, if you're concerned about captions or something like that, then just say, hey, just shoot me a text. I'll thumbs up it. If, you know, just if you're worried about like the theological accuracy of that person or something like that. Those are the easy things. Like, the harder things I do think are just trusting students to actually live out what we're asking them to do. And like, if we spend some time teaching them hermeneutics and how to study a passage, and then our city groups right now are going through 1 Peter, and there is a guide that our discipleship pastor, Joe Thigpen, like, letting them, you know, study and prep for that and make the changes they need to make in a understandable way. And then also letting them figure stuff out, like, hey, you can figure out the structure of how your group works through this, you know, and giving them freedom to do different things. You know, some of what we do with the budget is we set aside a certain amount of money and we go, hey, you come up with evangelism ideas. Like, we have an evangelism team that's led by a student. We had an entire retreat for incoming freshmen last year. I spoke at it one time. All the other seminars and workshops and recreation, everything about that retreat was led by students. And I gave them guidance and I oversaw it. But, you know, I think you have to just be willing to let go and give it up. And I think there's a lot of reasons why people can't let ministry go, but I think that's what hurts team building is just you're either just, you can't think long-term enough to actually build a team because you're just personally running around doing the next thing, or you can't give it up because you need the glory, or you don't trust people or whatever. And then I read a couple books that were really helpful. One of them was called Chess Not Checkers. I was talking about that book a lot, and people kept thinking I was saying chestnut checkers. Which
yes, checkers with chestnuts.
Yes. Only my pieces are carved from chestnut wood. But no, chess not checkers. That book really helped me learn how to plan long term, and to give people, like, if you want people to play the game, you need to explain it to them. Like, here's the rules, here's out of bounds, here's what it looks like to win. Like, you have to define that. And then you got to let them go, like, let them play. Stop bottlenecking them and getting in the way and frustrating them too, because really great leaders want to actually do things. And, you know, there's a difference between somebody who's a cog that wants to be just, you tell them what to do all the time, and a leader who actually wants to build. And we work really hard on that.
That's good. You know, one of the things that, and Ashlyn, you touched on this, I think, some, as you were talking about that sort of that transition away from college and into the young adult world. That's certainly a challenge of ministry, you know, really of college ministry in a sense, to help equip people for that. But what are some other things, as you, Ashlyn, as you interact with our college students, and Hunter, as you obviously lead the ministry and interact with them, what are some of the biggest challenges that you guys see to ministry in that life phase, like towards college students? What are the things, the barriers towards ministry?
For college or young adults?
College.
For college
specifically, yeah.
I mean, well, there's the whole issue of just like, if you are unchurched, you know, that then you are, you know, you need to be reached by someone. So I won't even, like, I'll just set that aside, you know, but for Christian students who are in college, or for Christians who are college students, I mean, I think they're definitely, I'm just trying to think about, you know, mostly girls that I talk to, and guys too. And then like my own self when I was in college, there's a million demands for your time, but it's not the same as like as you get older and these are like responsibilities that demand your time. It's like a smorgasbord for you to pick and choose how you want to spend your time. And so some people I think are paralyzed by, you know, having to make those choices, or they make the wrong ones. I think there's other people who they try to do it all, you know, especially if you're like an achiever and you want to, you know, feel like you're building your resume. I mean, so a lot of that stuff I think depends on just what your sort of like end goals for college and then further into your life are. It just depends on like how you're going to manage your time and apportion your time. So I think that can be a barrier to doing college ministry. I mean, certainly just like the pull of the world, you know, in college. I mean, just you could be, you know, I don't know. My family didn't grow up like consistently going to church, so I definitely wasn't the like, you know, come up through youth group, you know, into college ministry kid. But you could even, you know, I've seen this. You could even be that kid, and come from a very maybe sheltered home, and then, you know, get to college and still feel the pull of like what we can all, I can say the college experience, and we can all think about that, you know, partying, drinking, going out, whatever that looks like. So I mean, those are two big things that I think of that can be barriers. And I also imagine, and I think it was like this when I was in college. I mean, I was an English major at FSU. And so like being in a pretty liberal department in terms of like social values and things like that, there were not very many Christians around me. And so that, it was difficult to even have like conversations of faith or be respected for the views that you hold. Now I feel like it's, I mean, it's always bad, but I feel like that's another barrier too, that I think college students are just having to work to hold on to their own faith, and then also to try to figure out how to navigate a culture that can be very hostile to it. Not everyone, but maybe to find those people who are open to it. Those are just three things that pop into my mind. Hunter, I'm sure you can speak to a lot more of them.
Yeah. I think one of the big ones is that they're in a season of life where we've all just allowed them to be really self-centered and selfish, like culturally. Yes. So like I say this to our students all the time, but you're just in a season of life where everything actually seems like it is about you. Like, what do you want to major in? What internship do you want to do? Where do you want to go live? This is the season where you're setting up your life. And those things aren't bad, but they are bad if it conditions you to think of yourself as the center of the universe and the center of all things important. And
because I would imagine that impacts mission significantly.
So,
I mean, both in the immediate context and the idea of going, to work somewhere for, like a go-to kind of thing, where somebody's using time after college to go missionally. If they're so self-absorbed, it's just like, oh, well,
that's going to hurt my career. And we live in a world that's like, you need to take care of yourself. It's a very self-care, self-help world that is very oriented on, and I was actually having a conversation, I need to flesh this out more, but I'm working on it, is that like we also, a lot of what's modeled to us in popular culture today is the idea that you focus really hard on you build a really great career, and then you kind of do the proverbial finger point to the sky, like when you do a touchdown. And it's like, so you work on you really hard, and then as long as you give God credit, you're good, and it's like, that's not actually what we see in the scriptures. And I was teaching through Philippians, and when Paul's like, to live as Christ and die as gain, and then he says, I've actually decided it would be better for you if I remain. And I talked to our students when we're working through that passage, and I said, do you see the significance of the local church to Paul? Because Paul's writing the church of Philippi, and he's saying, I want to be with Jesus. I'm tired of this. I really believe in Christ, but it's better for your sake. Local church of Philippi. First Church Philippi. Starting a new series. For me to go and to be with you, to build you up, to encourage you. Okay, well, most college students are not thinking that way. They're thinking, what's the best for my sake? And then how can I kind of do a proverbial finger point, in the end zone up to God? And then maybe I can attend some church and give some money. And so like, I think that's probably the hardest big picture thing, is just everything around them is about them and is tailored to them.
Which is so interesting because, and I think this is a real opportunity that, our college ministry does and steps into, and that, ministering to college students, this is such a great opportunity to lean into this, because when I think about the like life rhythms that college students have, and like the way that your life is structured, and I know this is not true for everyone. You might be a college student who works full time and is having to, support your family, or, everybody, you might be in a unique situation. We kind of tend to think about the college student who either doesn't work or works part time, lives with the roommates, like kind of, it fits that mold that most of us think of. But the way the markers of your life really can lend it themselves so well to like an intense season of growth if you are focusing on the right things, and if you're living in a kingdom-minded way, and not, as you're saying, Hunter, like with everything centered on you, because you are around more people than at almost any phase of your life, just naturally. I remember like my apartment as a college student was like a revolving door. People were in and out all the time. There were always people home. There were always people coming over.
It's the easiest season of life to build relationships.
Yes,
in
you're
my mind.
so communal. As you get older, you tend to just, most people, we tend to be protective over our time. You have to schedule things all of a sudden. It's like you have to really fight against that. So if you can like develop that in college, and then it's also a time where you are, even if you have to be, you're open to learning, or you're trying to earn a degree. So all of these things, like living, in and among people, being in a season where it can literally be your job to learn things, you know, to get your degree and to grow. And then also a great season to like try different things out, you know, to sort of spread your wings a little bit. If you're doing all of that, like with the kingdom in mind, that can actually be a really fantastic time for your growth. And I think that's what we see in a lot of our college students. But yeah, when you are thinking that, you know, all this is centered on me and sort of building up my future. David Brooks talks about, like, he wrote a book called The Second Mountain, and he talks about this trajectory that a lot of people take, which is where you spend your quote unquote first life building your career and sort of your platform and, you know, your kingdom, so to speak. And then when you've made it, you realize that doesn't fulfill me. That's not enough. And then your second mountain to climb is actually like the life that you live for other people. And so I think about, like, if we could actually, you know, take a Christian approach to that and say, it's not like I'm going to, you know, kind of to Hunter's point, like build myself up, point to the sky, and then say, okay, now I'm grateful, so I'm going to bless everybody else.
I built myself up for God.
Right, yeah. But instead, like, I'm going to lay my life down. Those are two very different approaches. So.
Yeah, no, I think that's really good. One of the things that comes to mind for me as I think about this and as I hear about these sort of challenges is that, like, you know, Jonathan Haidt talks about in The Coddling of the American Mind, just this sort of delayed and prolonged adolescence. And I mean, I almost wonder too if that helps form some of that worldview of it is all about me, because parents the whole way through, I mean, again, there's exceptions to this certainly, but they've walked with them and coddled them, as you know, as they argue that in that book, that like that then they come to you know, this realization long before they get to college that it's all about them. What extracurriculars are you involved in? Like, how can I make this as easy as possible for you? Does that rub? I mean, do you see that as like a conflict when these students come and then are quasi-independent? And then, you know, how does that play into that? I'm just curious if you have
we
thoughts
call
on
our year one student leadership program everything your parents should have taught you. And that's like, that is like, it's such a, well, how should I think about it? It's such an arrogant thing for me to say, but like, you know, I mean, yeah, Ben Sass's A Vanishing American Adult is a really good read for people who work with college students, and so is Coddling the Mind. But so, for instance, okay, why can these students not manage their time? Why can they not work through conflict? Why do they not care about the church? Because this is how they've been designed, right? Because they were in high school and you would drive them to piano, to tennis, to soccer. You would force them to do their homework. You would wake them up. Literally everything, you would manage their entire life. And then now you've just dropped them off into no supervision. You're not waking them up. You're not making them study. You're not helping them make decisions. You can't quit the team if you don't want to quit the team. You're going to go to practice every day. You know, so you manage so much of their time. And then what do you do as soon as like conflict arises, and you step in and you intervene? You don't force, you know, not very many people are making their kids work through conflict. And then all on top of that, like, you're like, you're not very committed to the church because you know, you're hardly there on Sundays. If they don't want to be a part of youth because it's cheesy, there's not enough kids their age. They're not, all the excuses that youth pastors hear, you know, that of course they've learned that this isn't a priority. These people, this place, and if the youth ministry is not good enough, they don't have to go. And it's like, you should be conditioning your kid, if they're a part of the church, to see themselves as the youth ministry, not attending the youth ministry. Like, the youth ministry is the students of our church family coming together. And even if it's not super cool or whatever, that's not the purpose. And where should your student learn a lot of these things? In the context of the local church. And so that's always been, to me, I think, you know, we're dealing with exactly what the system that these kids are coming up in is designed to do. But I will say this. We've had some incredible students come out the gate from great churches, all different sizes, some traditional, some not traditional, some small, some big. Our ministry is incredibly indebted to the parents and pastors of those churches, because we actually have a thing called the For the Campus Network, where churches can actually help the transition and give us the contact information of students. And we have certain things that we do even before a student graduates high school that's actually under our umbrella of City Church U. And those students who come in, I say I want, quote unquote, that kid from every youth ministry, like the kid in the youth ministry that actually loves the Lord and actually sharing that. I want every single one of them. I want them to choose to come to Florida State to be a part of City Church U instead of going to a better advertising program at this university because they want to be a part of this ministry. Those students are going to do more for fighting lostness on the campus than a new series, a cool background, or a tasty snack ever will. And so, we're incredibly indebted to that. And so I will say that I think by and large, a lot of these students are coming in like that. But when you have a student who's actually comes from a great family and has been pastored well, holy cow. I mean, you are unleashing a missionary into it's phenomenal. That is the ministry.
Yeah. I mean, just hearing you talk about that, it's almost thinking about that as like you can, and parents and other church leaders can think about how am I preparing this individual to go live on mission, and hopefully they're doing that in their high school or, wherever they are. But like to actually view college as an opportunity for mission, like I'm not sending my kid away to get a degree, although they are. I'm not sending my kid away to have a great 4 years because I loved mine, although they probably will.
Mm-hmm.
I'm preparing and sending my child away to help advance the kingdom on a campus is an incredible way to think about the stewardship that parents and youth pastors and churches have for those kids who aren't yet there to go and to be a beacon of light on the campus.
And if you're listening to this, you should go to our college podcast for the campus, shameless plug, and listen to the interview I did with one of our senior student leaders, Kevin Pham, and listen to the way that Kevin Pham thinks. He'd be a great guest on here. But listen to the way he's a senior student leader. Listen to the way he thinks, the love for the Lord, the love for others, the hospitality, the love for his church, all of that. And just realize that could be the norm, not through crazy pyrotechnic services, not through huge budgets, through intentionality and love and care over the course of that student's life. And Kevin's parents aren't even believers. So if you're a parent in this room, think about how impactful you could be in your kid's life. But even with that, that's just a student from youth ministry. He's had a long legacy of great mature men invest in his life, not just at City Church. And you can be hopeful for what a college student can look like. And we have a lot of students who are on that track. I think it'd be cool to have somebody like Kevin on here just to hear like, this is what a college student thinks like, or maybe even someone even a little younger, a little more edgy.
Yeah,
that could be fun.
More edgy.
Like Jacob here.
little rougher around the edges. What last question before we close with our local on tap? What most encourages you, Hunter, about college ministry and just sort of the state of the gospel going forward in campuses?
I am incredibly encouraged by what is happening in churches all across the nation that look way different, that have totally disenchanted the idea of all of this cool, trendy, hip ministry, and said if you will feed these students and make the investment in them, they will do what the Lord promised they would do. And I think that I'm just so encouraged by how if people will take investing in college students serious, regardless of all the other big picture structural pragmatic things of ministry, how impactful that can be, because that it can change everything in that student's life, because they can go on to be, think about Sean Moranci, who's a brother to me, who I met him in high school, because they can go and be great church members and serve other people and move to other cities and join other churches and serve those churches and break cycles in their family and have godly marriages and potentially raise godly children. And those kids will be, they'll be raised in a home that loves the Lord, and the cycle's broken and the gospel advances. And really, if we remove all of the 21st century thinking about Christianity, like that's how it works. Like, why do we think that the first, like from Jesus's resurrection to today, things have gone well? I'm not post-mill, okay? But things have gone well, okay? The strategy's working. Christ is building his church. Yes.
The mission continues to go forward. The mission
continues. It's exploding in third world countries that do not have smoke machines, that do not have new series. And we can actually have a lot of hope in the fact that, like, if we just teach the word of God and love people and disciple them and actually do all this stuff, that it will work. And if Jesus doesn't come back in 2,000 years, it'll still be working. It's timeless.
Yeah, God continues to be faithful.
Yeah. I think we talked about me on this podcast like I'm not cool, but I'm obviously super trendy and cool, right, Jacob?
Ashlyn, one
You can
last.
go to Hunter's. Well, you don't. I was gonna say you could go to Hunter's Instagram account and judge for yourself,
you
but you don't
can't.
have
You
one.
can't. But you could
I
go
do
to
have
his.
I do have a Facebook, because even though I deactivated it like months ago, maybe like half a year ago, like I clicked on an email that reactivated it. It was like
They suckered
someone
you
tagged
in.
you. Yeah, they did. They did. Yeah, they
You
did.
have a mole working
Wow.
to get
But
you
I don't
back.
have the app or anything yet.
Ashlyn, one of the things maybe you can touch, just maybe briefly talk about, and then we'll jump into the local on tap, is, one of the things that we've made a priority really from day one as a church, and that goes well before our leadership here, is, and really it's been a testament and a priority for Dean when he planted, was to reach the campus, to always think of the campus as a primary mission field in Tallahassee. And so as you think about church leaders, maybe who might be listening to this, and maybe they're in a college town, or maybe they just, for whatever reason, have, a small number of college students, how can they think about and prioritize college ministry in their church? Obviously, that's a huge question, but what are some maybe just quick high-level things
in 30
to think
seconds.
about?
Here we go. No, I mean, I think everything Hunter just said, that we want to, I think it reveals how much we rely on programs or not, if what we're first concerned about are budgets or gatherings, or, that's sort of the downside to, getting to see what everyone around the country is doing, is that you start to form, whether you know it or not, like your vision for what, like, man, they look like they have it figured out. And so I would say, like, if you can get all of that out of your mind and do exactly what Hunter just said, which is prioritize and value the things that are actually going to disciple and develop students and get the right people in place, then let that be what it is for your culture, and use a lot of the avenues that your church already has. If you don't feel like you can, we didn't, I mean, Hunter, you are one of the best builders on our staff, if not the best builder. But this didn't happen overnight for you. You pulled people around you and you thought a lot of this out, and this is, grown over time. So, I don't know. I think if you're a church leader who's trying to think about how to do something like this, talk to other people, take the pressure off of yourself. Just really, if your heart is to invest in college students, then you're going to be spending time with them and you're going to do that. And so, yeah, I mean, I would echo everything Hunter just said, and let the value be, let the most important thing be pouring into those students. And then the systems and the structures, I think you just decide what you want them to be, but use your group structure that's in your church, or use, curriculum that you're already developing, or use gatherings that you already have, however you can do that, and just make it happen. That's
good. So as we transition, hopefully this has been a helpful conversation on college ministry and what that looks like at our church. If you want to hear more, as Hunter mentioned, the For the Campus podcast, I got it right that time, is available on all major platforms, I'm guessing. I listen on the Apple podcast, so I know it's there, but I assume it's other places too. You also are outdoorsy, unlike the person whose seat you're filling. So no offense to Dean, but in his honor, here is the pop of the top. What are some things locally? I'm not anti the outdoors, but I wouldn't consider myself outdoorsy either. Ashlyn only thinks of the outdoors as greenways in Tallahassee.
The outdoor community really hasn't got our auditing and legit, like whatever the process is for determining if someone's legit or actually outdoorsy. We don't have an authentication program like other.
There's no blue check mark for outdoors people.
Like sports people, they're always like talking about like real fans, and it's like we don't have this board, accredited board to authenticate who's real and not. So it's just. Yeah.
But you are. So what what are some great outdoor ways to enjoy Tallahassee?
Yeah. So Tallahassee has a great park system, which I know Ashlyn is a big fan of greenways.
Passionate. I'm outdoorsy in the sense of
that's the bougie park
trails.
But we actually do have a really great park system. Yeah. We have the largest national forest in the state of Florida, which is right out by the airport, that you can go on walks. There's really good walking trails. And then really we have decent hunting up here. Yeah, we have a lot of public land for students who love to hunt. Like there's a longer conversation around that we don't have time for. And we have incredible fishery, and my dad's a charter fishing captain. I have a podcast that's pretty rooted in the fishing industry across the board nationally. And we have some incredible, like even from the shore, from, you know, in Florida, we have really good largemouth fishing. So we got good ponds, lakes, streams. But really, I mean, our national forest is probably our best kept secret. I mean, it's people drive from all around Florida to come up here. And we have Wakulla Springs, which is really fun, which is not far from here.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of good outdoor things to do.
What's your favorite fish to catch?
Probably redfish.
Okay.
Although I like tarpon. I like fly fishing, and saltwater fly fishing is kind of a niche, but I like to be able to see the fish before I cast at them, and then to be able to position a boat. And I just built a boat specifically for this with a local skiff builder, but to be able to like spot the fish from far off and sneak up on it in the boat and make a cast and trick that and have the full satisfaction of tricking that animal. So that's my favorite type, and my dad's business does a little bit of everything.
That's cool. I'm just happy to put a hook in the water and get a bite. I don't really care how I do it. So,
but I mean, whatever floats your boat, as they would say, in the business.
Yeah. Well, this has been another episode of the Local Dive. We hope it's been helpful. Also give the Captain's Collective and the For the Campus podcast a listen, and we'll see you next week. Take care.
Thanks for listening to The Local Dive, a podcast diving into deep and shallow musings about Christ, the church, and culture. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a review wherever you listen to podcasts. You can follow The Local Dive on social media and continue the conversation with us on Instagram and Twitter at The Local Dive Pod.